Okay, let's go ahead and get started. This, I hope, is a success strategies class that I hope we're in the same class together. Um, I'm going to start off with just kind of a self-introduction so get to know me a little bit better. You can probably guess I'm not from Malaysia um, or China. Um, I am from America. And why did I suddenly lose the picture here? Okay. Um, my name is Ken Harvey. Harvey, as you probably know, in America, we don't put our name order the same as in some parts of the world. So Ken is my given name. Harvey is my family name. Some people have a hard time pronouncing Harvey, and anyway, it's easier to remember Ken. So, Ken and Barbie, whatever. Um, so most people just call me Dr. Ken, Prof. Ken, but I don't care if you just call me Ken. I consider myself more of a professional than a professor, although I've been about half and half in my career. Um, I actually, right out of college, when I wasn't much older than you guys, my somebody came to the university looking for an editor for a large city weekly newspaper that they were just starting, and I don't know why my professor recommended me, but I became a newspaper editor right out of college of a 100,000 circulation newspaper. And so like I said, I consider myself more a professional than I do a professor. And if I were to go into a newsroom, if you were all journalists and I came in and said, call me Dr. Harvey, I'd probably get thrown out the window or something. In fact, I've done a survey, and the executives, media executives, say they would, if everything else was equal, if they could either hire somebody with a Ph.D. or somebody with a master's degree, they would hire the person with the master's degree. There's actually a prejudice against a Ph.D. in the profession, and I understand it, and that's why I've researched it. So if I were pursuing a job outside of the university, I would probably just drop my PhD off my CV altogether and pretend I didn't have it. But anyway, Ken, Dr. Ken, Prof. Ken, I don't care. But Ken is fine. I do have a lot of experience. It looks like I'm 100 years old. I've double dipped a lot in the sense of when I was working for a daily newspaper as an editor, I at the same time was running a journalism program at the local college. Um, Before I came overseas 11 years ago, I was doing PR under a contract for the state, but at the same time running commercial newspapers. So I was both a PR marketing, PR person and a journalist. Um, I've worked on the internet and done web creation for when I started creating websites, probably about 1998, something like that. Although I was active on the internet from the start, and got involved in computer-based education in 1994. Before very much going on, I taught some of the first. I don't know if you know what desktop publishing is, but desktop publishing is how you actually produce a newspaper nowadays electronically. You make it all look like it's supposed to look like on your computer, then you turn it into PDF and send it to a printer to actually print it out if you're going to print on paper. And that was kind of a turning point. Um, it started a little bit before Microsoft became dominant, but by 1988, I was teaching desktop publishing at college, perhaps the first person to teach desktop publishing at a college level. So anyway, I'm kind of techie oriented, besides being a writer and a journalist. Um, so anyway, you kind of get the idea. A lot of experience. I'm not really 100 years old. This was one of my newspapers, one of my commercial newspapers, more of a kind of a news magazine. I was competing against a daily newspaper, so I wanted to do something a little different. So mine was weekly in print, daily online, trying to catch the new wave of people going to the internet for news. I also ran simultaneously this entertainer magazine. This is still going. Although I sold I kind of have an ownership interest in it, but not much in that. I do a lot of stuff online. There's an online blog I have. I'm going to probably start doing a little more blogging. This is one of the websites I created. But I also, I may don't know if it's even on the list, but I've been very involved in non-government organizations. In order to get my state contract back in 2001, I had to have a nonprofit organization, so I formed one. And then I started doing a lot of research through my nonprofit organization. And when I went to Kazakhstan 11 years ago, after I sold my newspapers and after my contract with the state ended, I went there to teach, started teaching. I didn't get my Ph.D. until until 2007. So that's when I started looking, deciding, do I want to stay in the industry? Do I want to go teach now? So I went ahead and went to Kazakhstan for 9 years and now here. Anyway, the funny writing there is Russian, if you didn't guess. Anyway, so I started this training program to help non-government organization, NGOs to do a better job, be more successful. And since then, that's gotten like $10 million in funding. So that was a website I created for them. I do a lot of multimedia work, although this stuff is all embedded from other sources. I think everything on this page is, but actually, no, some of the stuff on the bottom I did. But anyway, another website I did. And I do quite a few online videos. And so this is one I did. This is on that website, not on the front page, but someplace else. And there's a bunch of instructional videos I did there. This is actually what I did as PR. Actually, this is what I did for the state of Washington under contract to them. So it was a PR job. It was all internal communications, a quarterly publication I did that was distributed to all the educators that worked with migrant students, as well as it went to officials in migrant education all over the country. It was the only one in America. And so people, even in the federal level, read it because there wasn't anything else to read, I guess. So as you see, that was also bilingual. This is bilingual Spanish. I am fluent in Spanish. And since the Mexicans or the Latino Americans are those that make up the bulk of our migrants in America, although there's quite a few Russians and others as well. Oops, went wrong direction, I guess. I also worked with some corporations as PR marketing director. So this was an architectural engineering firm I worked with, and this was the front cover of we had to kind of produce books to send out to prospective clients, because clients in this case their jobs might be worth $10 million or something. So we weren't just sending out flyers, we're sending out entire books of why we were qualified to do their work, like say for $10 million or something. So marketing at that level is a little bit different than marketing for toothpaste or something. And I got into political advertising and actually in the politics, and the left side is me. And so this is a publication I put together. I was able to, because of my knowledge of publishing and so forth, I was able to have the lowest budget among 8 people vying for 4 positions. I had the lowest budget and got the most votes because I knew how to do it. The other one on the right was something I did a long time ago, 1974, when I was fairly new in the industry. This is a type of, now it's the most popular type of advertising currently. Anybody in business? Anybody in the business department? Okay. You may not know yet, because a lot of professors don't know yet, but they should. that the most popular type of advertising now, display advertising, particularly online, is what they call native advertising. And native advertising is made to look like the content around it. So sometimes you get confused that it's not, that you don't even know it's advertising you're looking at. So the page on the right, even though all the way across the top it says paid political ad, paid political ad, paid political ad, and at the bottom it says paid political ad, a lot of people, including public officials, read the whole page or most of the page before they realized it was an ad. And I was able to bring that candidate up. When I took over his campaign, he was number 8 in 8 people running for mayor of Tampa, Florida. And I had 3 weeks to get him to number 2 to get through the primary election, at which point only the top 2 would go on to the general election. And in 3 weeks, using advertising like this, which is very not normal, or especially in those days, but actually it's not normal nowadays. Here we go again. I'll get it going here in a second. Anyway, you saw it already. I'll come back. See if, I don't know why I'm losing it. Anyway, using that type of advertising, I brought him up from number 8 to number 2 in 3 weeks. And by the general election, about 5 weeks later, or 6 weeks later, he won 2/3 of the precincts using a very different type of advertising than what normally is used. Native advertising. Well, let me see if I strange. I don't know why we're losing it. Maybe there's the bad connection, but it seems to think it's connected. I'm seeing it on the computer, but it's not coming onto the screen. Okay, there we. Well, it's a little different. It's showing what I'm actually seeing instead of what PowerPoint would like it to do, but that's okay. Anyway, I also write books and stuff. This was one I co-authored about the impact of mobile on society. So I wrote chapters on how it is and will affect education, news, marketing, advertising, branding, public relations, business. Anyway. Okay, so that's enough about me, but you kind of understand where I'm coming from. I'm kind of a workaholic. I say I frequently do 2 jobs at once. Right now, besides my professorial work, I'm founding a new publishing company. Anyway, it's an interesting enterprise that I'm working on. I won't get into that, but that's the kind of thing I do. I want to talk a little bit about how I teach the class and why I do it the way I do it. I want you to be very involved because I believe that's how you retain, and that's how you retain long term. I did a published study back many years ago, 40 years ago or so. And what I wanted to do is in my area of journalism, as I interviewed and surveyed executives, the employers of our future, of our students, I asked them, first off, how did they like our students? And the answer was not very much. They didn't like the products being produced by American universities. They didn't think they really learned what they needed to learn to start a real job. But I asked them, well, how do we prepare them better? And their answer was have them write, and write some more. That's how you become a good writer, is you write. And so I started trying to figure out, well, how do we get them to write more? And so one of the ideas I had was have them write more in classes like general education classes, like this one. Have them write more in also introductory level sort of courses. And so we got a grant. I got a grant from the Hearst Foundation, and we did an experiment. We took a big class, as a class of 80 students, and we divided it into three groups. No, excuse me, it was 120 students. We divided it into three groups. 1/3 of them, 40, we sent off to the regular professor, and 80 of them I kept in a big room. And half of the 80, now there's another 40, every week had to take a quiz, which is what the other professor was doing in the other room. He had a weekly quiz. That was his normal way of doing things in a big class like that. And the other 40 of my students, instead of taking a quiz, they wrote like about a 1-page summary of what they learned that week. They just wrote about it. And so what I was hoping for was to just show that the ones who wrote would learn more or less, could also respond to a final exam that was memory based about as well as somebody taking quizzes the whole time and practicing and stuffing stuff into their memory. But that they would also become better writers because they would be writing more. And so that semester at the end, they had to do a large report, and then they also had to take a final exam that was all memory based. Number one in the memory based exam was the ones who wrote, not the ones who memorized. And number one among those in their writing was those who wrote, because they wrote and they practiced their writing. I only took part of what I was trying to prove was that a professor could do it without spending a lot of time grading. And so I limited myself on these weekly reports they had to hand in to 30 seconds per page, per submission. It wasn't worth a lot of credit for the class, so it didn't impact their final grade a lot. But the theory was if I wouldn't maybe thoroughly grade every paper, but I had 15 papers or so during the semester to grade, it would come out, I would figure out who were the ones that were working the hardest at it. It would come out okay. So that's all I graded, and we got the results I was talking about. The next semester, the regular professor taught everybody, and we tried it a different way. Half of the students, they divided the semester into two halves, and so they didn't have a final exam. They had two half semester exams. And so half of the students did writing in the first half of the semester and half did quizzes. And in the second half, they flipped. And the other half, the ones that were writing, took quizzes, and the ones that were doing quizzes did writing. And then we just compared them against themselves. So now there couldn't be any selection error, because we were comparing how did they do in the half semester exam when they wrote, and how did they do in the half semester exam when they did quizzes. And the winners were those who wrote. And in that case, the professor didn't grade the papers at all. He didn't do anything. He didn't give any feedback. But just writing is kinesthetic learning is an important way of learning. If you want to learn a new language, one of the best ways to do is to write it. Write that language a lot, and it sticks in your memory better. And it also, even beyond that, so you have the kinesthetic learning, but you also have, in this case, you have to think about what you're going to write. And so stuff is going on in your brain, and you're putting it together, you're synthesizing, you're figuring out what's most important. So you're analyzing, And then you're figuring out, okay, what should I write in my paper? Now you're synthesizing and creating, and all that is brain work that you don't have to do when you do a quiz. And what I wanted to do in this experiment, which I didn't have the money to do, was to then test them all, somehow come up with an incentive for them to come back a year later, or maybe even 2 years later, and see who remembered the most in a year or 2 years. Now, I have no doubt what the answer would have been, but I didn't have a chance to test it. But other people have tested similarly, and I'll show you a chart here in a second of some of what they've found. But there is another aspect, however, to it. Our brains don't always work the way we want them to. The good thing about getting your brain more involved in stuff is that you build long-term memory instead of short-term memory. We all know what we do when we cram for a quiz, right? You cram for the quiz and it's gone. I got very good at cramming for quizzes. Okay, I got really good grades, so I'm a good crammer. But you'll find I'm very forgetful. Right here in class, I'll be forgetful. I'll say, "Oh, I want to tell you about this," and I'll forget the name of what I want to. Is the air conditioning on? Seems a little warm. Somebody wants to check that. If it's on, that's fine. Just seems warm up here. Anyway, but it's also important that you know that your minds are fallible. And so hopefully part of what you learn in this class is to not always trust yourself. I did another experiment. I had people try to predict the future about something that they knew something about, but they couldn't possibly have guessed the results 10 years in advance. Maybe somebody with a Ph.D. you might say he had an advantage, but trying to predict the future 10 years in advance is hard, even for somebody with a Ph.D. So I only asked 2 questions on this. One was, and this was in 1978, I said, what do you think is the future of the U.S.-Soviet relations in 10 years? Now, ironically, in 10 years, it not only was better, it was almost non-existent. The Soviet Union collapsed about then. So there was almost no answer because there was no Soviet Union. But even at best, during that time in between 1978 and 1989, or wherever it collapsed, Ronald Reagan was president during most of the time, and the Democrats were running ads that he was going to start World War III. So they were promoting to the public that this man is dangerous. You can't trust him. He's not only not going to end the Cold War, he's going to destroy the world, basically. So we had that going on. But regardless, trying to predict the future, the other question was about the economics. At that time in 78, our economics were kind of bad. And so the question was, what will the U.S. economy be like in 10 years? Better, worse, or the same? And that was the same 3 options for the U.S.-Soviet relations, better, worse, the same. So in reality, the average person would have no better than basically 1/3 of a chance, 33% chance of guessing 10 years in advance for those sorts of questions. But my point of the research was not who got it right, because I wouldn't have known, but how sure were they that they were right? That's what I wanted to know. And were people who were extreme politically more sure of themselves that they were right than people in the middle, or who? And were journalists more sure they were right than than normal people, than the readers? Actually, I did find, and I give them some credit, that journalists were the least sure they were right. And among everybody else, but everybody, all of them, I had 4 groups. I had general interest, like newspaper journalists. I had special interest journalists who were journalists for magazines that were somewhat extreme on both sides, very conservative or very liberal. And then I had people out of the phone book, so just general public. And I had the readers of the extreme magazines. So readers of magazines that were extreme left or extreme right. So I had these four groups I wanted to see. The those that were least confident by only a little bit were the journalists, but all of them thought they had about a 70% chance of being right. In other words, they were so confident it was like double what it should have been. Journalists and everybody. So what I did find was basically there's not much difference. We all think we know the truth. We all think we're right. And that's the problem because we can't all be right. And they were very sure they were right. 70% sure they were right about something they could not possibly know. And they were sure. They were sure about it. So it told me a lot also about how we think. What am I talking about here? When I was a kid, we had something called an erector set. It was a little bit like Legos, except it didn't just fit together like Legos. Those are easy. Those are for wimps. This, you had to bolt them together. So you had, like you see in the upper left, you had strips of metal. And to put all these pieces of metal together, you had a nut and a screw or a bolt. And you had to bolt them together. And so you could make Eiffel Towers and skyscrapers, and they had motors you could put into it. You could build cars, and I think the one down there is a Ferris wheel, carnival ride, things like that. So they were quite intricate, but the same sort of people that do Legos maybe were people doing erector sets. This I think probably required a little more effort than Legos do. But the reason why I show this picture is there was a famous author back in the 1960s who studied scientific revolutions. And this is kind of from him. This is kind of my depiction of it, that these pieces of metal for the erector set are like concepts in our mind. We build from even before we're born, we build in our mind a conceptual framework through which we understand the world. And the older you get and the more you study, actually, the more rigid this becomes, the more pieces you put together. And so if you can imagine, for example, the Eiffel Tower there, before they put all the crossbars and everything, you just make one long piece up and another long piece up, and you have four long pieces and you attach them at the top, and then you push it, it's going to collapse because you have these upward pieces of metal, but you don't have any crossbars. And so you have to put some pieces of metal sideways and maybe diagonally to piece them together and bolt them tight so that it looks like that. And now when you push it, the whole thing has to collapse or nothing. All the pieces are tightly put together. Our minds are like that. And so what this author explained, and this is it's called History of Scientific Revolutions or something like that. And his name, like I said, I'm forgetful. I'm not remembering right now. But anyways, but the name of the book was something like that if you wanted to look it up. I looked it up the other day in Google and it came right up, 1960 something. Anyway, what he pointed out is, first off, that every so often we have a scientific revolution. Like, for example, in the old days, centuries ago, they thought that the universe revolved around the Earth. Obviously, that's not true. But it took a scientific revolution to change people's perspective of what the universe was like. Of course, in those days, the universe was, they thought maybe 10,000 stars or something, whatever they could count. It was a long time before they realized there were billions of stars. It was like about exactly 100 years ago when they started figuring out what our universe is really like. So back in the 1600s and so forth, they had no clue. And so they were still confused about what was the center of the universe, and they thought Earth, obviously, And of course, even before that, and about the time of Christopher Columbus, a lot of people thought the Earth was flat. And so they were afraid to go sailing too far out in their boats because they were going to fall off the edge, obviously. And so through the years, through the centuries, we've had scientific revolutions where people have suddenly said, aha, now we see things differently. And they look at life and we look at everything with a different paradigm as you understand it in a different way. I like to read. I don't know if any of you, anybody into physics, any physics major? Do we even have a physics major? We probably don't. Anybody as a hobby? I love quantum physics because it blows my mind. Quantum physics. If you watch some of the videos on YouTube about quantum physics, it will blow your mind. It is one of the most. If you want to stretch your mind, quantum physics is where you stretch it. There are serious scientists in quantum physics who think that we're a video game, that we don't really exist. Because as they've researched in physics, they found that it's too precise, it's too mathematical to be random. You can create a formula for anything. It all works out. For example, we just had a famous occurrence about a black hole. What happened just this last week or so with a black hole? What do we have? What happened?
We have the image of the black hole.
Okay, the first time we've ever taken a photographic image of a black hole. Why couldn't we do it before that? Black holes suck in light. Black holes have so much gravity, they suck light in. So light can't escape. Therefore, how do you take a picture of something that light can't come to you? The light gets sucked in backwards. So they had to take pictures from different directions to try and kind of put it all together and overcome this problem that light doesn't, light coming straight at you isn't going to get to you. That won't come, it's going to be back. So they had observatories from all over the world taking shots at this black hole to try to put them together and come up with one photographic image of a black hole. So anyway, back to black holes. A few years ago, some guys they started calculating. I have no idea how they calculated this, but they figured out that a black hole, that all the stuff sucked into it, kind of the digital aspect of everything sucked into it is equal to the coating on the outside of the black hole. And I don't know how they proved that, but they thought they had the evidence. We had, forgetting names again, what's the name of the astrophysicist that died recently, is in a wheelchair and yeah. So anyway, he's obviously one of the smartest guys ever. So these guys, the other smart guys, brought him this theory that you could that the not the perimeter but the area, the area of the black hole was equal to basically the programming, the digital, if you were to digitize it, of everything going into it. In other words, the black hole is keeping a record of everything it sucks in. Well, that's one of the things they found out. They said, wait a second, that sounds like a digital game to me. That's too precise. How in the world does that make sense? He didn't believe it, by the way, at first for about 3 years. Then he said, okay, I guess there's enough evidence that's true. It's mind-blowing. It doesn't make any sense. How could that be? That's not something random. And so we actually have people in Seattle. There's some researchers that have gotten millions of dollars to try to catch the programmer at what he does. In other words, if you do video games, programmers have to take shortcuts. All the options that exist can't be part of that game. That would take an infinite amount of programming to give a game all options. It can't do it. So it has to take shortcuts and put some ends to force you back into the game a little bit. It can't give you all options. But how about if we're actually in a game, in essence, or if God created us, if there's a God and he created us in a digital format, if we are digital products of God, they want to try to catch him in a shortcut, like a game programmer. Where did he, there's even God, they don't think, if there is some superpower, they don't think God is so powerful as to have an infinite number of possibilities. They think they can catch him taking a shortcut. Is that mind-blowing? There's serious people about this. They're serious about this, that we are a game. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who resist that idea. And of course, the scientists don't all agree with it. They're putting money towards it to try to figure it out. But that's why I say the quantum physicists are the ones that are blowing people's minds right now, because what they're finding, there's lots of other things too, that basically they're the ones that are proving that basically time doesn't exist. And one of the ways they found that was that well, first off, they sent beams of light through little slits in like a piece of metal. They sent the beams of light through. And this also kind of goes beyond time. It's also weird in lots of ways. But they send the light through, and when they were watching it, the beams of light would go through the slits, and they would hit the backdrop, and there would just be a line of light going through. Unless they observed it. That would work as long as they weren't observing it in a scientific way. And I'm not sure exactly how they observed scientifically, but once they started observing, and actually it wasn't just light, it was electrons, a flow of electrons. So maybe it wasn't just as visible as what I'm describing. Anyway, once they started actually watching the electrons going through, and again, I'm not sure exactly how they watched them. Now excuse me, it's the other way around. When they weren't watching, if I remember right, they would go through the slits and they become a wave. They'd spread out and become a wave. And so there would be, the light would be detected across the whole backdrop through the slits, and then they would spread out and have varying degrees, but light across this whole backdrop. Then when they observed what we would expect them to observe. The light goes through and it hits one spot. It's all directed at one spot, in each of the slits. So 2 spots, the electrons are hitting. That's it. They don't make a wave. They don't spread out. Now, first off, why would observing it matter? That's a whole other, the programmer question. Who programmed this, and why did they program it that way? They didn't want us to know the truth somehow. Once we started observing, the electrons act differently. Anyway, they decided to do this dual slit, do this in a little bit different way. There was an explosion in space 2 billion years ago, and it had to go around a planet or something before it got to us. And so they said, okay, this is more or less the dual slit experiment. You have this quasar, this huge explosion, goes around this planet, it comes to Earth. What will happen when we look at the electrons, or what would it be? Whatever they're seeing when it comes through the universe like that. Photons? I don't know. Anyway, if we look at them now, and I guess it doesn't really matter. There's different elements they can look at, and it does the same thing. So what will happen when we observe and we don't observe when it gets to Earth from 2 billion years ago? And it did exactly the same thing. When they didn't watch, they observed the wave pattern. When they did watch, it went straight. Anyway, in that case, that's why they decided time doesn't exist, because if it existed, it couldn't do that. I mean, basically they're saying, first off, they're not answering the question of how could it do it, how could observation change this. They're answering the question, well, obviously it changed what happened 2 billion years ago, because the way it is acting had to start 2 billion years ago before. And so they're saying that as soon as they started to observe, they changed what happened 2 billion years ago. Well, I'm not sure if I think it's more amazing that observing it made the change, but nonetheless, they relate it to the time doesn't exist. That when you observe, bam, what happened 2 billion years ago just changed. So that is also a little bit mind-blowing. Anyway, that's why I like to read about quantum physics, because you can't have a real structured mind, a real conceptually type mind, and read that and not just pass out or something. Okay, here we go again. Okay, so what does that have to do with the erector set? Um, It has to do with the fact that going back to what the author said back in the 1960s and looking at all the scientific revolutions, old people never lead a revolution, not a scientific revolution. Not never is too strong a word. They seldom lead a revolution scientifically because they built their conceptual framework too tight. And if you don't understand something, if you can't make it, if you think the universe revolves around the Earth, and somebody comes and tries to prove to you that no, the Earth revolves around the sun, and the sun is revolving around a core within our galaxy, the old guy is going to have a hard time changing their perspective of reality. And so the stronger you make your conceptual framework, the more you inhibit your learning. But you have to learn to get there. So it's kind of what we call a catch-22. If you don't learn, you don't know anything. If you do learn, you inhibit your future learning. So then you can't learn anything, I guess. I don't know. And they did an experiment in college that also tried, okay, if this is true with older people, if he's right about this, then what happens at college between the smart kids and the dumb kids? Or at least the kids who work really hard and get good grades, who have crammed all this stuff into their head, and those who are playing video games. So they presented to the students probably something like I was talking about, quantum physics or something like that, and they did some sort of an exam afterwards, and the ones who understood it the best were the stupid students, because they didn't have any reason not to believe it. They sucked it all in. Oh yeah, sure, that makes sense to us. The smart students already had their conceptual framework was already too strong. They had a hard time accepting it. So one of the things that Stephen Covey, he's the author of the main book we're going to be studying, although we're going to be studying more than 24 different idealists, teachers, trainers, whatever they are, authors, and so we're going to get lots of different ideas to feed our minds, and hopefully your minds will be hungry and won't be too tightly knit to consider new ideas. But one thing that Stephen Covey says is that's one reason why one of his principles is synergy, to seek synergy. He's the one that really made that word popular. He didn't create the word, but nobody talked about synergy until Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. What is synergy? A second, I realized I'm. So what is it? Tiny? Well, it's a little more than that. Anybody else have an idea of synergy? What is synergy? It involves tiny, but it's a little more than that. Anybody? The idea of synergy is, you might say, creative energy by more than one person. So it's combining people's ideas and getting more. The idea is that that the whole is greater than the sum. So in other words, you put 5 people together and you ask them to come up with a solution to something, but you don't let them talk to each other. And then you give them the same assignment, but now let them talk to each other. You're going to get something much better when they have a chance to talk to each other. They're going to be able to bounce off ideas off of each other and come up with something bigger than what they could come up with by themselves. And that's synergy. You get something bigger than the sum of the parts. And so one of the things that Covey talks about is you should welcome people who disagree with you into your group. One of the biggest problems in America right now There's a lot of political discord right now, and it's because we've created like little tribes, not little tribes, big tribes, conservative tribes, liberal tribes, and these tribes suffer from what we call groupthink. They think that, well, everybody that I know who's smart agrees with me. And so they're convinced, and then people who don't agree with them, then what are they? Well, they must be stupid. And so the conservatives have no idea how liberals can think the way they think in America. And liberals have no idea how conservatives think the way they think in America. And so we have all sorts of clashes going on right now because of groupthink. Everybody in their groups thinks like them. And therefore they create a new reality for themselves. And this is the only reality that makes any sense. And anything outside of that is nonsense. When you cannot understand something and it doesn't fit, you have your Eiffel Tower built and somebody gives you this other piece that this piece is supposed to go in here, and you look at this Eiffel Tower and you go, it doesn't fit in there. I'm going to throw it away. That's what you do every day with nonsense. If you don't understand it, if it does not fit into your conceptual framework, you don't worry about it. You just throw it away. It's gone. Which means, well, wait a second. There's that strip of metal there, and it said it's supposed to fit into this. Nah, it doesn't work. Must be wrong. So out it goes. And so the conservatives are throwing away any evidence that the liberals want to give them that we should be doing it this way. They throw it out as nonsense. And the liberals consider these objections of the conservatives, and they think, well, they're idiots. And so anything they have to say, that goes out as nonsense. And we have these tribes in America that some people are saying we could seriously have a civil war in America because of the degree of misunderstanding between them. Well, Covey's saying, welcome people who disagree with you into your group. That's the only way you achieve synergy. If you have 5 people in a group and they all think exactly alike, you have no synergy. You might as well just have one person. But if you have 5 people and they think a lot differently, now you have a chance for synergy. Now you see the world in a different way. You see the problem, whatever the problem is you're trying to solve, you see it in a different way because you think differently. So hopefully we will learn from each other as we think differently. Going back to what I was talking about before, but however about retention, again, we have this quandary where if we learn a lot, we build a very rigid conceptual framework. But if we don't learn, we don't know anything. So, but anyway, for our sakes here, one reason why I want you to do some writing for this class, and I'll get to your assignment shortly, is that it will mean more to you. You will think about it more, and you'll remember more, and you'll be able to apply it to your life more. What they found, similarly to what I would have expected with my experiment many years ago, 40 years ago, was if somebody just lectures like I'm doing right now, within 3 hours, they may remember 70%, but in 3 days, they're down to 10%. There's no long-term memory in that. If you do a demonstration, and maybe mine's a little bit of a demonstration with PowerPoint and stuff, I don't know. In 72 hours, you can remember it, retain it, 72% in 3 hours, and twice as much as a lecture in 3 days, 20%. If you combine them and have demonstration and explanation, then you can get it up to 85% in 3 hours, 65% in 3 days. If you're a really good teacher, you can get it up there a little bit. But if you actually allow students to demonstrate and explain and get them involved, they remember it all in 3 hours. And in 3 days, they're up to 85%. And then my question was, what do you have in 3 years? I still think you have a lot of retention if you're the one doing the teaching and you're the one writing about it. If you're analyzing, evaluating, synthesizing, creating, it will stick in your brain, for better or for worse. You'll be all that much further to where you can't understand anything anymore. So let me make another point. What's the most important priorities in education? I probably see things very differently than a lot of professors. Which is one reason why I created this class. Because what we found is that not only do I believe this, which I do, but there's now scientific evidence that the most important thing in your achieving success is your attitude and soft skills. Soft skills would be things like creativity, um, teamwork ability, positive attitude. All those sorts of things are part of attitude and soft skills. Um, Communication skills, I put number 2, even if you're not a communications major. I mentioned I used to work for engineering architectural firms in their marketing. I worked for 2 different ones. And both of my CEOs took me aside and said, Ken, I wish I'd taken more communication courses. Said my engineering skills are important, but real success in this industry is done with communications. That's how you get jobs. That's how you succeed. That's how you sell your ideas. If you don't have good communication skills, you may be the smartest engineer in the world. You're not going to be very successful, except as a technician. In other words, you won't make good money because you're sitting in the back room someplace playing with your computer. You're not going to be the CEO. And so communication skills are very important, no matter what it is that you're doing. Computer and other skills, this day and age especially, computers can make up for a myriad of weaknesses. And so the further we get into the digital age, the more important computer skills are. That's one reason why I keep updating my computer skills. And because I know once I stop, I'm worthless. I have to keep myself updated. So all these book chapters I wrote a couple of years ago, those 7 chapters, was to keep myself updated. Well, where are we going? Where are we going because of mobile technology and so forth? What are we doing? The last and least most important is memory-oriented learning. Because first off, you're not going to forget it anyway. Unless you were very involved in the learning of it, you're going to forget it anyway. Secondly, what you're memorizing will become outdated very soon. We're adding so much new knowledge that some experts are saying, by the time you graduate, what you learned in your first year of college will be outdated already. That doesn't mean it's worthless. There's certainly core concepts in it, but our society is learning so much so quickly with the help of digitization and everything that there's just too much to learn. You can't memorize it all. Well, that's why you need to have Google and other tools to be able to look stuff up, because you can't memorize it all. It's just impossible. And so to base an education on memory is not actually a good thing to do. I don't believe in memory-oriented education, and I also don't believe in grades as far as that goes. If I could, I'd give any of you that worked hard in this class an A. I'm not allowed to. They tell us our limit is somewhere between 20 and 25% of you can get an A or A minus, and after that, they will tell us to go back and redo our grades. I've had them do that to me already a number of times because I put in too many A's and A minus. So raise another question. Do you love what you're good at, or are you good at what you love? I need to answer that question. Do you love what you're good at, or are you good at what you love? Okay, there's a vote for good at what you love. How many of you agree with them? That's more true than the other. That more true is that you're good at what you love than what you love. That you love what you're good at. So you're good at what you love. Okay. Does that mean the rest of you think it's the other way? That you love what you're good at?
I guess it's both.
Huh?
I guess it's both.
And I think that's true. in different ways. Some of you may, in some areas, you're good at what you love. In other areas, you love what you're good at. When I was your age, I got good grades, but I really struggled at my weakest area of academics. You know what my weakest area was? Writing. So I became a journalist because I felt like teaching and writing, my life had more meaning than math and science. My brother was a world-class scientist, and I think I could have been too, but I didn't want to be. I've had students in my class, students come to me and say, my parents are making me major in economics. I hate economics. And I said, you want me to talk to your parents? They're making a big mistake. Because if you hate economics and you're majoring in economics, guess what? You're never going to be really good at economics. I mean, you maybe the first couple of years you graduate, but lifelong learning is so important and so forth that if you hate economics, you're not going to keep studying it after you graduate. You're going to quit. And then you're going to become a dummy over the years because you haven't kept up because you didn't like it. And so ultimately, it's almost impossible to be really good at something you don't love, ultimately. In the short term, you can do it. In the short term, I was really, really good, and I'm still good. I'm naturally good at math. I know that. But I stopped taking it after geometry. So don't ask me to do any calculus. I never took calculus. Don't ask me to do any trigonometry. I never took any trigonometry. And so obviously I'm not very smart in math anymore in that sense. I mean, I can add, lots of numbers in my head and stuff because I'm naturally good at it. But I stopped learning it because I wanted to learn more about other stuff that I thought was more important. So I got better, and like I said, I was an editor right out of college of a large city newspaper. But I took a lot of work to do that because that's not what I was naturally good at. That's what I loved and what I wanted to be good at, and so I worked hard at it. And I ignored the stuff I was naturally good at. So I flipped my life, so to speak. So yeah, I would say it depends on, a little bit on your circumstances. For some people, it might be more one way or more the other. Obviously, if I continued in math and science, then I would have to say the other answer. But I chose not to because I didn't believe that's what I wanted to do in life. And so I worked harder and became a good writer. So it's also kind of also a key here, how hard it is to remember what is useful and relevant to you. If it's really useful, if you really are interested in something and it's useful and relevant to you, it's not hard to remember stuff. What you don't remember is what's not useful to you. What's not useful or relevant to you, you memorize it for a quiz and out it goes. It's gone. You might remember a little bit about stuff that isn't relevant and meaningful to you, but you don't retain it very well because it takes some effort to put it into your conceptual framework, to associate it with things that mean something to you. So you're bolting those little concepts together takes some effort. And so if it's not meaningful to you, by definition, if it's not meaningful to you, you're not going to bolt it into your conceptual framework. And so it's going to go real fast. So I had a student who took a writing class from me, a news writing class. And she came the first week or two, and she just looked miserable all the time. She looked depressed. And I worried about her, and then she disappeared. And she stopped coming to class. And so I kind of thought, well, whatever. She didn't want to be in my class, and I didn't worry too much about her. About 2 weeks till the end of the semester, she showed up again. She said, I need to pass this class. What do I have to do? And I said, well, look, I've been teaching all the other students for the whole semester, and you want to get a passing grade without doing the work. Good luck with that. She said, well, just tell me what to do. I'll do it. I said, okay, you have to write 4 news stories, and they have to be long, and they have to be done exactly the way I've taught everybody else. and here's my sheet of my critique sheet, and here's a little bit of explanation. So I talked to her for about 20 minutes about what I expected in news writing. And she said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I thought to myself, yeah, here's an F. She'll be back, happy. If I give her a D, she'll be happy. She comes back, the best news stories any of my writers wrote. The best stories. Long, most of the students handed in maybe 2 pages. She handed in 4 or 5 pages each of, 4 stories, 4 or 5 pages each. Had absorbed everything I taught her. She had absorbed, gone through my critique sheet carefully and complied with everything in my complete sheet. My critique sheet is 3 pages long and has examples, but it goes very thoroughly into what I expect to see out of your page. She had absorbed that. And I said, what the heck? And I could tell it was done in such a way that she couldn't have plagiarized it. It was all news about the university and interviews with professors and stuff like that. So there's no way she could plagiarize it. What is going on here? You're an incredible writer. And she said, I love writing. Why do you come to class? I've just been depressed. I'm an economics major. My parents forcing me to take economics, and I hate it. I love writing. I said, well, you're a natural writer. Let me talk to your parents. They're crazy. They're forcing you in the wrong field. You can't be successful in economics, but you can be successful in writing. You're the best I have. And so she graduated. She only had like one more semester to graduate with her economics degree. And with my help, she got a job at I think it's with Forbes. So a magazine that included some economics writing. But now she gets to be a writer and doesn't have to be an economist anymore. So again, do what you love, and you're going to be more successful, as she is being more successful now that she's done pleasing her parents. She's pleased her parents. She got her degree, and now she's writing. So I like to say attitude is everything, and it relates in these 4 ways. It gives you a passion, a sense of mission. If you love something, then you're all into it. You're going to put extra energy into it. That's your passion. You have a positive attitude. You believe you can do it. And by the way, they've done one of the scientific researches that they've done is which correlates more with success, your GPA or a positive attitude? Which one do you think? Positive attitude, not a GPA. Your GPA has almost no correlation to success in life. That's why I don't believe in grades. There's no correlation. No correlation between your grades and success. So why the heck are we giving grades? I mean, I give grades. I'm not really saying I don't believe in grades, but I believe in grades for motivation, not as an analysis of your capabilities, because they don't. They don't analyze whether you're going to be successful. There's no correlation. But if you have a positive attitude, that does have a correlation with success in life. So it's more likely you'll be successful if you have a positive attitude than if you have a high GPA. Also, if you have a good attitude, so forth, you have a strong work ethic because it's not work. I grew up on a farm. I started working on the farm when I was like 4 years old. My dad would put me on the tractor. He'd say, drive that way. And he'd hop off the tractor and he would pick up big bales of hay and put up on the trailer that the tractor was pulling. And then when we got close to the end of the row, he'd run back up there and jump up there and turn it around for me and say, okay, hold the steering wheel. I'm going to go back and do his work. And obviously after I was 4, I started doing a lot more work as I got older and understood what to do. So for me, if I stay up, I'm very frequently here until 10:30 at night, because it's not work. Not work for me. Work was on the farm. I didn't want to be working on the farm under that hot sun and so forth. I wanted to be doing stuff like the other kids were doing. So now in retrospect, I appreciate the work ethic that the farm work did for me and other things too. learning more about life and caring for animals and so forth. A lot of things I learned that I still treasure today, but at the time I did not appreciate. But most of them are, relate somewhat to my paradigm of life and my attitude towards life. And the other thing, again, what I just said, if you have the right attitude, if you really have a positive attitude about something, you're going to be a lifelong learner because you want to be, not because somebody says you have to be, but because you have a passion about something, you will continue to learn more and more about it because it's interesting to you. So these are parts of attitude that I say are number one. The most important thing you can have in life to succeed is your attitude. And hopefully this class will help you. Okay. Well, other things I want to sign up for this class on Moodle, the keyword is Success 2019. Does everybody know how to sign up for a class, how to use the what do they call it, the enrollment key? Anybody not know how to do that? I've got some slides here that can kind of go through it if you don't know, but I'm not sure exactly where you're at and whether you've had to sign up for Moodle for other classes and stuff. Let me put it this way. If anybody needs some help, I do have some slides here I can go through with you. And why don't you just stay after we stop class if you can, and I'll show you how to enroll in your class. But I'm presuming that most of you know how to do that. You can go into library, just real quick here. On the front page of our website, you can go to library, and under that, there's a item there, Moodle. That's our distance learning or our online learning program. Click on that. That'll take you into some discussion and give you the link to our Moodle site, our online learning site. There's some instructions. Again, the keyword is Success 2019. You sign in using your regular ID and password to sign into it. There is a kind of a course right towards the top about Moodle quick guidelines, so you can go into Moodle. Once you get there, you can take that little course. There's some video in it and so forth if you don't know how to do it. So again, you can watch a video. And again, remember Success 2019. Okay, I'm Mentor Stephen Covey. Before I want to show you a video first. I remember if some of them I've downloaded, but I guess I'm going to. Oh, I know. Let me go to the Moodle site. That's what I want to do. So here we are in Moodle, and I'll go through the syllabus more in the next class because some of you probably aren't going to sign up for the class, or a lot of people in the general ed courses are kind of trying to decide what they want to be in. So I'll go through the syllabus more seriously in the next class, but there is a syllabus on here, and I'm going to skip that and come back to it in a second. Under here, under week 1 learning material, I want to watch a couple of videos. And so there are some videos here that you can click into. The ones that we don't watch in class, you should watch out of class. So the first one I'm going to show you is this one from, Denzel Washington's in it, but that's not what it's called. Which is it? Oh, yeah, he has a picture down here. Oh, down here. Okay. Some of these show you the embedded video. Some are just a link. Okay, just a short one there. And he's daydreaming all the time. You know, he's got his things he wants to achieve. I had two friends in high school. One of them was a straight A student, never got anything but an A. And the other one was the dumbest kid in our class. I don't know that he ever got anything except a D, at least any of the classes that I was in with him. There might have been a couple of occasional sort of classes that he did well in. But most of the classes, he was the worst student in class. When they graduated, the valedictorian, the smartest kid in class, he couldn't figure out what he wanted to do with his life. And so he became a truck driver. For 4 or 5 years, he just drove truck back and forth across America, trying to figure out what he wanted to do. And when he finally did decide, he became a counselor at a prison. That's what he did, that, you know, he felt like he was changing lives, was to help people that had done something wrong and gone to prison to change their lives. And so he spent all of his life as a prison counselor. The dumbest kid in class, he became a college professor in mechanics. He wasn't good at numbers, he wasn't good at writing, he wasn't good at reading, but he was good at mechanics. And so he was good enough that the college hired him to teach mechanics at the college. So it's, you know, I use that example because it kind of, to me, demonstrates the fallacy of grades and the importance of, the one I'm most proud of is my dumb friend. Because I don't know how in the world he kept a positive attitude going through school for 12 years being told he was an idiot. Which is basically what the school did. By giving D after D after D, they basically, every teacher he had just about told him he was an idiot. Not in that word, but that's what the grade did. You are the worst student. What does that mean? You're an idiot. Okay? You can translate it any way you want to. If you're the worst student in class and you have the worst grades in class, you're an idiot. And so I don't know how in the world he did it. How could he become a college professor and stay positive enough to do that? I have to be very, to me, that is an incredible, I mean, my friend who became a college counselor, I admire him for doing something. He could have been anything. He could have been a world-class scientist or whatever he wanted to do. And he, kind of like me, decided that wasn't for him. He wanted to do something where he could affect people in a positive way. And so he became the prison counselor. The other one becoming a college professor, though, the fact that he overcame all this negative feedback that he got all of his life is, to me, remarkable. Amazing how he overcame that. How he had any idea that he could possibly be a college professor, even if it was mechanics. I don't know how he overcame that constant barrage of negativity. So that's the one I admire the most, is the one who was not destroyed psychologically by all that negative input for year after year after year. There's also something called, any of you heard the theory of multiple intelligences? You know anything about that? There's a professor, I think he's at Harvard. I know he's in Massachusetts. I think he's at Harvard. A guy named Howard Gardner. And he started studying child geniuses. He figured if a 3-year-old can become a genius in something, that there must be something in the human mind that relates to that. Because how could a 3-year-old go bam and suddenly be playing Mozart like a professional? There's got to be something. There must be some musical intelligence in there that child had an extra portion of, but it probably exists in all of us. It's there. Some of us don't have as much as that child prodigy. Other 3-year-olds are doing calculus already. How is it? How can they be doing calculus when I can't? There's something in there that is mathematical. And his theory is that it's all in all of our brains, but some of us have a stronger portion than others. Anyway, so he argues that sometimes maybe only 8, maybe 13 Anyway, there's somewhere between 8 and 13 types of intelligences that he has identified. He's not sure they're all of all of them. That's why he's still debating with himself, which are innate in everybody's mind, but just, again, in different portions. One of those intelligences, for example, is social intelligence. Do you suppose the student with social intelligence is the best student? Probably not, because he's probably talking to somebody during class. And if he's talking to somebody, what's the teacher doing? He's gaining a real big resentment and bias against that student. That student's in trouble because the teacher hates that student for talking in class. You don't talk in class. That's not an intelligence that is rewarded in class. My brother dropped out of school, out of university after 1 year. He went back to farming like my dad, but then he didn't think he wasn't making enough money, and he wasn't enjoying it that much just being a farmer. He enjoyed the farm, but it wasn't, he needed to make more money, he felt like. And so he tried some sales jobs and tried selling real estate, tried selling insurance. And lo and behold, he found out he was pretty good at sales because he has very strong social intelligence. He gets along with everybody. Everybody loves my brother Randy. He's got a good sense of humor. He's somebody who likes to do stuff with people. He claims he makes more money golfing than anything else, not because he's betting or something, but because that's where he gets to know people. So he invites people to go golfing with him. They go out and become friends, and they buy insurance from him, and he makes money. So my brother is worth about $10 million. And I'm worth about $10. So who's smarter? I have a Ph.D. He dropped out after 1 year of college. Who's smarter? Well, I'm not the one with $10 million. Let me put it that way. You can debate. I mean, that it's a debatable. He envies me for what I do in my life, and I obviously wouldn't mind having $10 million. But I haven't lived my life that way. I made different decisions that didn't lead me there, and he made decisions that did. And he had an intelligence. He never got good grade in class, not as bad as my dumb friend, but he didn't get great grades in class. But I mean, for example, he blew something up in the chemistry class, things like that, because he was fiddling around, mixing stuff up, and it blew up. I mean, he wasn't the ideal student, kind of like Jack Ma, not the ideal student. But like Jack Ma, he's worth a lot of money, not as much as Jack Ma is, but he is worth a lot of money compared to what I have. So again, we all have a different mental makeup, and only a certain intelligences, in the Howard Gardner perspective of it, are rewarded in class. Basically, our writing skills, our mathematical skills are the main ones, our communication skills, our math skills, but they definitely don't reward social intelligence, which is one of the most important intelligences to achieve success. Because how you get along with people is, you're going to find somebody to put money into your business. I would say Jack Ma has quite good social intelligence. He had that whole room of people agreeing to put up the first $20,000 towards Alibaba because he knew how to communicate with them, how to inspire them. And you could tell even back then, that video from 1999, that first organizational meeting, even though I don't understand Chinese, I could feel his passion, and I could read the subtitles, but I could feel his passion. So he has great social intelligence. He admits he didn't know hardly anything about computers. He just knew they were going to be a big thing. And so he found people to handle computers. But he inspired them, and he had the vision, and he had the social intelligence to get them to where they are today. Okay. One more I want to show you, and this one, I need to hurry. I was talking too long. But This is one more question, and this is one I want you to think hard about. I guess I do need to explain something. I'm going to turn it on, and we may be a couple minutes late, but after I explain real quickly, in this class, we're talking about communication and my theory of getting you involved in your learning. The two main things that you're going to do in this class, first off, not, well, 15%, not a good amount, 15% of your class grade is going to be a team presentation. So all of your four teams, you're going to present about 10 chapters out of the college, of one of our textbooks called College Success. So it relates very much to what you're doing now, how you succeed in college. And so your team are going to do a chapter each from that book. There are a couple of chapters I think are boring, and I'm not going to do a couple of chapters. But there's about 10 of them, so we'll split the room into about 10, and you'll prepare a presentation for the rest of the class, about 20 minutes or so, on one of the chapters there. The more important one is writing. I mentioned how important I think writing is in memory retention and making something, putting it into your conceptual framework and making it part of yourself. However, you're not going to be graded on your style per se. This is not a writing class, so I'm not grading style. What I'm grading are your ideas, mostly. Now, I'm not saying that there's no, in fact, when we look at it, you'll see there is a place to upload your weekly assignment. Let me explain that. But anyways, most of it is on how well in the space you have available you summarize what you learned during the week. And the second one is how you have applied it to yourself. What you have now taken this information and how is it relevant to you? How could you have used it in the past? How can you use it now? How could you use it in the future? How can you apply it to you? And that's what I want you to write about. We call it a self-reflective journal. And so every week, I want you to write 200 words. 200 words is not very much, especially if you're doing a summary of what you learned and how that by itself could be 200 words like that. Because if you were sitting here today taking notes, you'd be ready to write your 200 words. But there's also some videos that you'll watch as part of your out-of-class work. We're not reading very many textbooks. We're mostly watching videos because the presenters are very inspirational. What they have to say, they cover what it is they wrote in their books anyway. And you can go read the books if you want to. But I wanted to cover the ideas of about 24 people. And so the best way I found was just find their videos on YouTube. So mostly we'll watch some videos in class and talk about them, and some videos, about an hour's worth of videos you will watch out of class. And then you'll have about an hour then to, first off, do a very short quiz. And I encourage you not to worry too much about it. It's open book, open video, whatever. You'll have plenty of time to do it. But every quiz is only worth 1 point, 1 percentage point. And you could probably guess and get half the percentage point. So you can't possibly lose too much on the quiz, but it's to help you think about what you should have watched on the videos, and it may even give you some ideas what to write about that. So every week you just write 200 words. Again, it's not the style I'm getting. It's your effort in kind of summarizing what you don't summarize everything. You can't summarize everything because you need 1,000 words, not 200. But you can summarize what was important to you. And so you might summarize the whole video, what I said in class, and then go on to how you were going to apply it in your life. So you have lots of material to draw from, but it just comes out, it comes out into 200 words, one double-spaced sheet of paper, basically. But then you're going to do it every week. I'm not going to grade the weekly assignments very closely. Sometimes I won't grade them at all, and then just say you did it. And the weekly The weekly grades are, let me double check here. Let me go up to the syllabus real quick. Okay, so we will go through just this one part. So let me blow this up a little bit so you can see it better. Okay, so your team presentation is worth 15%. Your weekly quiz, all of them, 15 of them, are only worth 15%, 1% a week. But that's not hardly hard thing. Like I said, you can guess that it's like half of them. But you want to do it, and just don't overdo it. Don't worry, don't fret too much about memory, because it should be pretty easy. But then your weekly assignment is 2% every week, just for doing it, basically, just for, I may, sometimes I will grade maybe a little piece of it on everybody, maybe I'll grade the first 2 paragraphs for everybody. And so you get a little bit of feedback on that. Or I may skim through and look at your sources and your summaries, and so I give you some feedback, well, your summary is not very good this time, or whatever. So I might deduct some points and you don't do a good summary. Every week, some weeks I don't grade anything, and then just give me your 2 points, 3 points. Give you 2 points for any minute. Other weeks, I may deduct a little bit because I'm grading everybody on something that I was thinking about and want to give you some feedback. But if you do it, if you can't get 200 words, there's almost no way you aren't going to get most of those points. So 2 points a week times 15 weeks, that's 30% of your time. All the rest of the semester, put those 15 weeks together and hand it in as your final paper. Assignment, and that's worth 40%. You can change it if you want to. Like I said, I'm not going to give you feedback on everything. I can't. That's too many students. But as I give you some feedback, you can look back and say, oh, he told me this week that I wasn't doing very well with my summaries. Maybe I better go back and look at all my summaries and maybe make a few changes. That's up to you if you want to. But anyway, so your final assessment is very easy in the sense of you take your other assignments and put in there. Now, the only caveat is I'm not allowed to give you all A's, even if I want to. If I hand in more than 25%, they're going to have me go back and change the grade. They have done that to me every week, every semester. I know that. I'm used to that. So I may have to grade a little harder on some things with that final assessment, particularly, just because I have to grade your grades, and I will do that as fair as I can. Some of it may be, it still comes to who's expressing their summaries the best, who's explaining how they're going to use it in their future the best. I've had some students hand in 9,000 words instead of 3,000. 200 times 15 weeks is 3,000 words. However, people with 3,000 words have gotten A's. So you don't have to go over 3,000 words. You don't have to go over your 200 words a week to get an A. But then I can't say it wouldn't help. I'm not going to ignore that somebody has done 3 times as much work. But if they put in a whole bunch of words and it's plagiarized, obviously that's not going to help at all. Or if it's just junk, they just throw words in to throw in words, it's not going to help at all. But if they actually have really gotten into this class and they've really put a lot of thought into it and they write 9,000 words, they're probably going to get an A. So I'm not telling you to write 10,000 words or 9,000 or 6,000 or anything else. I'm saying that if you do a good job, and you really spend time summarizing and thinking about it, it's going to be my desire to give you an A. And if I don't, the only thing that will stop me will be academic affairs. And so there is going to be some comparison. I can't avoid that. They tell us that our average grade in any class is supposed to be a B-. Now I go back and say, this is success strategy. I'm trying to teach you how to succeed in life. And so why am I going to give them B-? If they're working hard at this. This is ridiculous. So I'm not going to push up the number grade a little bit and see what they do to me. But that's my argument. In a success strategies class, you shouldn't penalize students who are working hard and doing a good job just because maybe they don't express themselves quite as well, and I kind of somehow distribute points. It's not a writing class. Do understand that the ideas that I'm after. there's 10%, to get to there, 10% based on spelling and grammar. 10% of your final paper. Not of the weekly ones. Might affect me a little bit. But I'm very rarely going to be looking at spelling and grammar very much in the weekly assignments. So those are mostly your IB summary and your self reflection. Well, I'm not going to be able to show this, but one of them I want you to pay some attention to. I mean, you should watch all the extra videos that I didn't go through, because that is your homework. There's two that I would strongly urge you to watch for sure. One is this Emily Isfahani, whatever Smith. She talks about success and happiness, and the two are not necessarily, well, depends on how you define success. People who are driven by success are frequently not happy. You can see that in the life of movie stars and comedians and famous singers and stuff who have committed suicide or died of drug overdoses and stuff like that. They get up there, they become rich and famous, and they get there and they say, is this all there is for life? And they're miserable. So success is not necessarily happiness. I kind of disagree with the way she expresses it, but she says somebody who is always looking for happiness sometimes doesn't achieve it either. And my perspective is somebody who is always looking for fun does not always achieve happiness. To me, there's a difference. Fun, happiness, maybe something above that, joy. People are pursuing fun all the time, I think it's very difficult for them to choose real happiness, or to create real happiness, because they're too involved with whether it be computer games or sports or whatever it might be that they're so absorbed in, going to the tavern to drink beer with the buddies, whatever it is, that's not long-term happiness. Anyway, she points out that actually in America, the rate of suicide is growing. And again, it's frequently the poorer you are, less likely you're going to commit suicide. It's the people who become very successful and then are still miserable. And then what do? And a poor person can always hope they can get rich. They may put money in for lottery all the time. One day I get rich and I'll be happy then. They may not be really happy because they're so poor, but they're not going to commit suicide because they're too busy working and trying to get someplace. The people who are really successful are the ones who get there and say, now what the heck do I do? I have everything and I'm miserable. And so they commit suicide, or if it's not suicide, they start escaping into drugs or whatever, and pretty much results in the same thing. So I lived a couple of years in Central America. That's how I learned Spanish. And I lived part of the time out with people who built their homes themselves. They had outhouses. They had no indoor plumbing. Their bed was just pieces of wood put on top of what we call sawhorses. But anyway, just lifted up some. And they gave us the guest bedroom, which was the sheet drawn and give us some privacy. And the bed, if you rolled a little bit, you would get your bottom pinched by the pieces of wood that were laying next to each other. Those people were really happy. However, they lived out in the country, they lived poorly, but they had good families. And then I go back to America, and the people are making families and committing suicide. So anyway, she talks about some of that. How do you really achieve happiness? What are the correlations to happiness? And then you yourself are going to have to ask yourselves, how does that relate to my achieving success? Well, what does that mean for success in my life? If I talk about my brother and myself, I'm not rich, I'm happy. So, I think he's happy too because he's made some good choices. And so I think he's probably happier than he ever had been because of some choice he wasn't for a period of time. But now I think he's really happy, and I'm happy for him because he cut to that pledge. Because that's really, to me, that's the first success you have to achieve and be happy. The financial part, the fame part, no, not so much. But each of you have to decide that, and that may be something you want to write about in your time. So again, look at the videos, think about what we talked about, and then a quick 200 words. Again, if you, especially if you come to class and start taking notes in class, so you have some ideas already, and if you watch the videos and you take notes about what you saw in the video that had some meaning to you, then with those second notes, those 200 words should be like that. I mean, as fast as you can type, you should be able to type 200 words. It's not that hard. If you have the ideas in front of you. So if you're taking notes anyway, then the ideas are sitting there. You have to organize them a little bit and type it out, summarize the things that you thought were important, and then say what it means to you. How can you apply it, and so forth. And it's not hard. And then it's amazing what you can do with 200 words for 15 weeks. If I told you had to write a 3,000 word report for the class, you probably would have already left because you would have thought that was impossible. But 200 words a week makes it very easy. It comes together very easy. So, okay, going back to I guess this close. Okay, back here. So under week 1, you will see here week 1 journal entry. You click into that, and you can type right into the computer, or you can upload a Word document, either way, or some document. And that's the way that's kind of, this is actually the way I'll grade the final one. Like I said, the graded ones, I'm going to give you the 2 points and say, forget about it. So not really, but these are things I'll be thinking about more or less in this proportion if I decide 1 week I'm going to look at every page. Or if I need to look at a piece of it, then I'll have this in the back of my mind to give you some feedback, because this will be the way I'll look at it when we head to the final thing. So you need some realistic feedback from time to time so you know what to do. So again, 40% is self-reflection, 40% review, 20% is just did you do it, and was it 200 words a week? And spelling and grammar. I can't even really ignore that. Questions? Sorry, we went over. Sorry if you didn't watch the video in class, we could talk about that a little more. But again, that's your homework, is watch the videos. And I am going to put up this short quiz. Probably tomorrow I'll do the quiz and put that up. But there's where you put in your 200 words. Okay, any questions?
When is the submission date for the journal?
Thank you for asking that. For both the quiz and for the journal entry, I will give you 2 weeks. So in case you have a test in another class or something, we try to keep up. You don't want to get behind. And so I am limited to 2 weeks because I want you not to forget about it. But you will have 2 weeks, so you get 1 week behind. You don't get too far behind. Because then it does become hard. If you do it every week, it's not hard. If you get behind, it becomes hard. So they did 2 hours in class, 2 hours out of class. I'm trying to limit it to no more than that. And so it should be hard to watch. Okay? Any other questions? I don't know for sure. I want to see because I haven't downloaded the enrollment yet. Because some people maybe here haven't even enrolled yet, or there may be people who went to other classes and said, "Oh, I hate that class. I enrolled that easy one from strategy or whatever." So probably Monday or so I'll get hopefully the enrollment for all of the classes, and then I can figure out. Yeah, I think it's 10 chapters, but I'm not sure that off the top of my head. Some chapters I don't want to do. So if we divide it in 10, we'll kind of look around and figure that's maybe 2 or 3 people per group. If this will end up, it won't be a large thing, but at least a couple people. Other questions?
The presentation for the.
I will pass next week again because enrollment for the Gen Ed courses hasn't been finalized. I will go ahead and pass around a sheet next week where you sign up with your partner or partners, it ends up being 3 in a team or whatever. And so I'll pass around a list, and it'll be the first one. We're going to go in order of the chapters. So, like I said, we're going to do 10 chapters, and we need a presentation, one presentation each of 10 weeks. So that means we probably start 3 or something. And the material's there, it's, in a textbook, it's not going to do a lot of research into this, but I want you guys to do great. As long as you can. Your own judgment, what's in this chapter is important. Kind of like what you're writing in your self-reflection. I'm not going to tell you, you can't cover a whole chapter. And so I want you to use your judgment and don't just choose the easy stuff. I've had some groups do that. And obviously, they didn't think too hard about this. They took the charts and they were easy to make PowerPoint slides out of. But they really didn't cover some stuff that was really important. It should have been obvious was important. And they covered stuff that was kind of boring. But they had to show it. Boring charts. So try to, go through the whole chapter and decide what really is important to people and what's not boring. Because what's relevant. And explain that. Other questions? Okay, we're not. We're way past time now. So thank you. Hope you all sign up for the class. Thank you.